Welcome to Reading Together with Thomas Ensor, The Lazarus War. Chapter 2, Extraction. PFC, Michael Blake, deceased. PFC, Elliot Martinez, deceased. PFC, Vincent Kaminsky, electronics tech, first grade, deceased. Science officer Gordon Olson, deceased. Corporal Kiera Jenkins, explosives tech, first grade, deceased. Waiting for response. Waiting for response. Waiting for response. Captain Conrad Herod, deceased. This was the part I disliked most. Waking up again was always worse than dying. I floated inside my simulator tank, a respirator mask attached to my face, and blinked amniotic fluid from my eyes to read the screen more clearly. The soak stung like a bitch. The words scrolled across a monitor positioned above my tank. Everything was cast a clear, brilliant blue by the liquid filling my simulator. Purge cycle commenced. The tank made a hydraulic hissing, and the fluid began to slough out. It was already cooling. I was instantly smaller, and yet heavier. Breathing was a labor. These lungs didn't have the capacity of the simulants, and I knew that it would take a few minutes to get used to them again. I caught the reflection on the inside of the plastic glass cover, and didn't immediately recognize it as my reflection. That was the face I had been born with, and this was the body I lived inside for 40 years. I was naked, jacked directly into the simulator. Cables were plugged into the base of the device, allowing me to control my simulant out there in the depths of space. My biorhythms, and those of the rest of my squad, appeared on the save monitor. All alive and accounted for. Everyone made safe transition. I had been operating a flesh and blood simulation of myself, manufactured from my body tissue. These were called simulants, simulated copies, genetically engineered to be stronger, bigger, faster, based on the human genome, but accelerated and modified. The Sims were the ultimate weapon, more human than human in every sense, fat-grown, designed for purpose. Now my simulant was dead. It had died on the New Haven. I was alive, safe aboard the Liberty Point. I was a soldier in the Alliance military. More specifically, in the Simulant Operations Program. Technically, the program was a special operation conducted by the Army. In truth, this was warfare on such a different level to anything that had come before. But the program was something separate from the other branches of the Alliance military. I sat on the floor of the tank, unjacking myself with the control cables. The neural link had been severed when my simulant was killed by the Krell onslaught, but pulling the jack from the back of my neck still sent a brief stab of pain through me. My arms and legs felt baby weak, ineffectual. Hard to believe that I was going to have to adjust to this all over again. I didn't like this body much. The sim had been a much better fit. Once the fluid had drained, the tank door slid open. I wrenched the respirator mask from my face and tossed it aside, slowly stepping out. I shook fluid from my limbs, shivering. A medic wrapped a heat-preserving aluminum blanket around me. Another reached for the biometric dog tags from around my neck, scanning them. "Successful extraction, Captain," he said. "Well done." My arms and legs ached dully. There were 3 red abrasions across my chest. Stigmatic wounds caused by the Krell assault. Inflamed welts and whip-like abrasions also marked my limbs, reminding me of the punishment my sim had suffered. I probed my chest with numb fingers, almost expecting to find stinger spikes stuck there. My ears still rang with the shrieks of the dying Krell. All that had happened was a reality. Just not a reality for me. At least not physically. I was in the Simulant Operations Center of the Liberty Point. As far as the eye could see, the chamber was crammed with identical bays, each housing a squad of troopers, operating simulants on missions out in the quarantine zone. Around me, my squad were similarly mounted in simulator tanks. Each trooper was undergoing the same disconnection protocol. "Nice work, people," I managed. I spoke with a slur of a day-long drunk, like my body wasn't my own. I took in my crew. They looked like paler imitations of their simulants, or maybe their simulants looked like improved versions of the squad. They were athletic bodied, but with determined, disciplined physiques rather than the over-muscled stature of bodybuilders. They were all dedicated, honed troopers, mentally and physically, but we were not regular soldiers. There were important differences between a sim operator and a hard-copy soldier. Each of us was pocked with data ports around the base of the spine, the neck, the forearms, the thighs. Those allowed connection between the simulator and our physical bodies. "Let's get this wrapped up," Jenkins hollered to the rest of the team. "Out of the tanks. Disconnected. Double time it." Although she tried hard not to show it, she looked good. She had a small, trim body, dark hair bobbed for ease inside the simulators. At 30-odd standard years, Jenkins was a 10-year Army vet and gave no hint of embarrassment at standing naked among a group of male soldiers. They barely registered her appearance. "Yes, ma'am," Kaminsky parroted. "Fuck off, Ski. I'm a volunteer just like the rest of you," Jenkins shook her hair dry. "Save that ma'am shit until I get the promotion." "Yeah, Kaminsky," Blake said. "How many years are you going to do as a PFC?" "I'm not listening," Kaminsky said. He stumbled out of his tank. He ran a hand over his buzz-cut hair. He was only 32 standard years, but he wore it short because it was receding. He'd spent most of his military career as a private, had been busted back to the ranks so many times I lost count. Kaminsky's torso was covered in tattoos, from a stylized phoenix to a leering grim reaper, resurrection imagery, death and rebirth, something that only sim operators got to experience. Across his shoulder blades, the newest addition to this flesh tapestry read, "Fish food," in cursive text. He'd acquired that particular marking after a night of hard drinking and a dare from Jenkins, which Kaminsky had evidently lost. He grinned inanely, pointing out a phantom injury on his head. "Hey Jenkins," he said, "will it kill you to set the charges faster next time? Could have saved me a whole lot of pain from the fish heads." "Whatever, Ski," Jenkins said. "At least they went for your head. There's not much in there you'd miss." Martinez laughed. "Corporal's got your number." The sixth member of my team hadn't taken it so well. Olson was particularly shaken by the ordeal. The physical and mental disconnection between the simulant and operator wasn't a pleasant experience, and he hadn't been trained for it. That was why they only sent sim operators into the field. Not everyone could do this. Olson's attachment to our squad had been an expensive experiment. The data ports on his spine and forearms had only just taken. The flesh around them was an angry red, out of place against his flabby white skin. "You'll find walking difficult at first," a medic explained to Olson. "The simon that you have just been operating was considerably larger than you. The difference in eye level might be disorienting. Try to breathe slowly and deeply. Focus on this light." Lieutenant Diker appeared, consulting a data slate. He was dressed in khaki fatigues, sleeves rolled up. Diker was our handler, responsible for directing the op from the point, feeding me intel. "Welcome back to Alliance Space, Captain Harris," he said, looking up at me with a worn-out smile. Diker never looked rested. His face was caught in a perpetual tired crumple. Barring the 16 million credits in military hardware that was destroyed in that explosion, I'd say that was a successful op. Diker was referring to the loss of the simulants in the Wildcat APS. The rules of engagement were fluid, and the sims were expendable. That made them unique in modern military terms, because sims could undertake missions that would be suicide to regular troops. Even so, our orders were to preserve the simulants if possible. Every sim had a significant credit value attached to it. "What can I say?" I asked rhetorically. I had time for Diker. Give me the latitude to do what I needed in the field. "The ship was brimming with Krell. They didn't leave us much of a choice." Diker shrugged. "No matter." He threw a thumb in Olson's direction. "I don't think that he'll be trying that again. Best leave it to the professionals." Diker nodded. There was something sad in his expression. "I'll port that back to command. The op otherwise went well. The ship has been neutralized, all human cargo taken care of. You have the black box data." He looked down at his slate. "That makes 218 trips out for you. You really are a stone-cold killer. Do you know what they're calling you down in the district?" "No idea," I said, concentrating on toweling myself dry. "It was a lie, of course." I knew. I might not like it, but I heard plane operators call me by the name. "They're calling you Lazarus," Diker said, "because you always come back. Whatever happens, you always come back." He sighed, nabs over the back of his neck. "Report to the medical station for a psych eval and a checkup. After that, you've earned yourself 7 days of station leave. Enjoy it." "I'll try to." "I mean it, Harris." He continued rubbing his neck, and I caught the flash of the tattoo on his wrist. The number 57. He left the bay, and I stood shivering and trying to forget what it was like to die, hoping that I would never end up like Diker, drummed out and dried up. The med teams checked me out. I had the usual tests and the usual results. No cerebral feedback. The physical pain would fade. The stigmata would eventually disappear. Lasting brain damage was unlikely. They went through the motions. The med techs had stopped really bothering with the checks. They were cursory and brief. I had proven that I was a stable platform for a bioengineered killing machine. Of course, there are real and practical dangers to operational soldiers like me. An operator might suffer a cardiac arrest, or some extreme sensory overload will jacked into a simulant. Such an eventuality was often fatal, but it was also incredibly rare. Far more likely was a slow physiological breakdown, brought on by the inability to tell reality from a simulation. They happened more often than the Alliance military cared to admit, but such operators were usually identified early in their induction. In my case, after so many transitions, there was nothing more to be said. Unless I crashed and burnt, I would stay on the program. I showered and dressed in sim-op shipside fatigues. I was used to disorientation caused by transition back into my real body, and the effects faded fast. Also probably find the whole experience disabling, but 20 or so minutes after I'd made extraction, I felt recovered. I left medical and headed down to the inner ring of the station. Kaminsky ran up to catch up with me. "Wait up, Cap," he called. "You plan on some rest and relaxation? We could head into the district, maybe hook up some company. Blank, Jenkins, and Martinez are coming. I'll join you for a drink. Nothing more." Kaminsky laughed. "You always get more in the district." A siren sounded nearby. We didn't flinch. It was a familiar occurrence on station. "This is an emergency," said a female operator over the point's PA system. "All available military police units attend Sector 5. Terrorist attack in progress." We casually made our way through the crowd of civilians and soldiers, heading away from Sector 5. A unit of troopers in black military police uniform, carbine shouldered, passed back towards the affected sector. Looks like more trouble, Kaminsky said. If we're not fighting the Krell, we're fighting each other. The director will never learn, I said. The monorail station was quiet, a handful of off-duty soldiers and Navy boys milling around. Are you taking the monorail? Kaminsky asked. He seemed to realize his mistake immediately. I'll walk, I said. Kaminsky just nodded. I left Kaminsky at the monorail stop and took an elevator further up the hub to Sector 3. This is my ritual, after every simulant operation, and I had to do it alone. Sector 3 was virtually abandoned. Except for the occasional bereaved parent, it saw little traffic. Mama and Pop spending their life savings on a Q-Space ticket, desperate for a last chance to say goodbye to Johnny or Joanne. The place gave me room to think. I walked the empty corridors, heading towards the Memorial Hall. I passed view screens showing the exterior of the Liberty Point. It was the largest Alliance forward operating base on the boundary of the quarantine zone, housing several thousand troopers and just as many aerospace force and naval personnel. Not as big as the Venus and Cloud habitats, but still a remarkable feat of human engineering. Near space bus with combat ships and assorted shuttles embarking or disembarking the point, like little flies flitting about a carcass. More ships seemed to leave than ever come back, I thought. All manner of vessels were assembled, from small military cutters to enormous warships, through to sleek experimental craft. This was the Alliance Navy, the combined efforts of the remainder of the United Americas, Europe, and much of the Western world. I stopped, pressing a hand up against the cold glass of the viewport. I watched as the light cast by the maelstrom glinted off the gathered fleet. For just a moment, I felt strangely patriotic before I remembered where I was headed. The Memorial Hall wasn't really a hall, or even a chamber, but more like a wall in the station's outer ring. I reached it about midday by the station day cycle, and as expected, it was empty. Words scrolled along the top of the wall. To all of those who have given their lives in the furtherance of the Krell War and for a continued existence of the human race. Millions of names were laser etched onto the wall, in chronological order, updated automatically as new casualties were reported. Those already occupied a significant portion of the outer ring for this particular deck. Small shrines, offerings of flowers, incense burners, other little sentimental trinkets had been left at the foot of the wall. I reverently avoided them as I found the spot, and crouched to read her name. I needed that drink more than ever. Liberty Point was on the very frontier of Alliance space. The nearest friendly outpost was several parsecs away, and with a decent Q drive it'd still take a good couple of weeks to reach. In any event, that was only a remote mining base. The point had to be self-sufficient and, as well as housing an enormous military contingent, it was also home to a sizable civilian population. That was where the district came in. Sprawling and ramshackle, drunken and noisy, it was an inevitable evil. Although officially designated as a civilian recreational zone, as long as you had the credits, the district was open to all. A trooper could get anything he wanted down from here. From illegal narcotics to any sort of sex, through to every type of alcohol. It was like a miniature Las Vegas, before the director had dropped the bomb. All neon signs, casinos, bars, strip joints. The officers on the point had a dedicated mess hall, but I preferred something rawer and always drank with my squad. Our favorite drinking spot was a run-down, old-style bar called the Depot. It was a favorite of the most sim operators. The slogan, "You might die once, but try doing it every day," was painted above the entrance. But it wasn't exclusive, and also catered for regular Army, Navy, and other assorted military. We occupied our usual table, not far from the bar. There was unspoken rule around the regulars that this was our territory. I sat with my head hung over a half-empty pitcher of cheap beer. The table was already heavy with empty glasses. I felt comfortably fuzzy, just drunk enough to blot out the pain from my last stop. Blake and Jenkins sat with me, not far off my condition. Blake was continually eyeing a topless blonde dancer, who was obviously looking to make his pocket a little emptier. Unlike me, Blake was young enough to feel at home in his real body. Could have had any woman in the place, except for Jenkins. She was having her own trouble. She already told the Navy ensign to go away several times, and was currently trying to avoid making eye contact with him from across the room. "This always happens when I make an effort," Jenkins said. "More hassle than it's worth." Jenkins wore a tight red dress, but no matter what she wore, she still looked like a soldier. My whole squad did. It was a state of mind, a look in the eyes. Martinez and Kaminsky were elsewhere in the crowded bar, last I'd see them. Martinez was trying to pick a fight with some off-duty Navy boys. Kaminsky was adding another tattoo to his already overloaded skin canvas. "I bailed out first," Blake said, shaking his head. "Second op in a row that I've bailed out first. I can't believe it." "Don't worry about it, kid," Jenkins said, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. Jenkins and Blake had a good relationship. She was much older, but looked out for him both during operations and when we were on downtime. He was like a little brother to her. And, as ever, the captain was out last, Blake said, smiling at me. "Last in, last out," I said. "There are no medals for that. Don't worry about it, Blake. You did good." I liked Blake. He was a good soldier. Showed a lot of potential as an operator. He was always like this after a mission. insistent on chewing over the details of the operation, on questioning whether he could have done things differently, eager to please. I was quite the opposite. While I wanted to get things done, I tried to seal away what happened after each operation, to compartmentalize the detail. It was easier to forget that way. Jenkins sucked her teeth. Let's have another drink. I want to keep my boys watered. She softly poured us another beer from a scratched plastic pitcher, spilling some onto the grubby table. We grabbed glasses and lifted them, knocking them together noisily, and spilling even more beer. To dying, Jenkins proclaimed. He threw her drinks down and swallowed them in one go. The beer tasted warm and still. The squad had a good dynamic. I led many during my lengthy stint in SimOps, and the current configuration was as best it had ever been. Kaminsky had been with me from the very start, although he hadn't incurred anything like the number of simulated deaths that I had. Most troopers like to take downtime between operations. Jenkins and Martinez had joined my squad at about the same time, 3 years back. Then Blake had filled an unexpected squad vacancy, and the rest was history. Jenkins wiped the back of her hand across her mouth, removing the overspill from her gulped beer. Such a lady, Jenkins, Blake said, laughing at her. The sort of woman my mother would like to meet. You're always talking about your mother, Jenkins said. She slurred her words. Do you miss your folks? Blake's face froze slightly. Jenkins had, inadvertently, touched a nerve. My squad's morale was a priority of mine. Something's bugging him. But before I could act on his change in mood, before I could question him, he was himself again, full of his usual bravado. I'll have to watch Blake, I decided. He was a thinker. Sometimes for sim operators, that wasn't a good thing. Of course not. It's just been a long time since I've seen my family, is all. Jenkins gave a sage nod. For me, 3 years and counting. You think those assholes would take the time to come visit me out on the wild frontier? Blake and Jenkins bumped fists, descending into drunken laughter. You're all Earthborn, except for Martinez. I like to believe that he was only a generation away from the homeworld. Relatives, families, friends, if you had them this far out from the core worlds, they are just names. Pretty pictures on holoscreens. So, what's next for us, Captain? Jenkins asked me. She nudged Blake's shoulder. We should bet on it. Get Kaminsky and Martinez in on the action. We'll get more airtime when we're good and ready, I said, trying to hide the fact that I was already yearning to be back in a simulant. Command will make that decision. You should be enjoying the downtime. I nodded at the blonde dancer circling around our table. She was still making eyes at Blake. I'm sure that you can find some action down here. Something like avarice crossed Blake's face, and he seemed to sit a little prouder in his seat. At least I was getting his mind off the topic of work. We'll report in 7 days and find out what our next mission is, I added. Are not curious? Jenkins asked. I shrugged. Not our place to ask questions. 5 years ago, that was when I decided I would just stop asking. Jenkins looked down at her drink, her face slightly bushed. Either that, or it was a neon light. I know, Harris, and it must still hurt. My squad knew everything, especially Jenkins. She was the unofficial listener, someone to talk to about history, concerns, the future, when it got too much. She was damn better listener than the psyche valves, with their cold, dispassionate eyes. Once, you didn't mind a psyche valve so much, a voice reminded me in my head. Jenkins leant across the table, giving me a knowing wink. I heard that something big is happening, about to be mobilized. I don't think it'll be against the Crow. If you ask me, we're going to be deployed against the Directorate. I barked a laugh at that. Bullshit. If I had a credit for every time I've heard that the SimOps program would be deployed against the Directorate, I'd be a rich man. Jenkins held up her hands, palm open. Hey, just telling you what I heard. Seems odd to me that so many teams get extracted, and so many are sitting on the point just waiting for orders. I even heard that old man Cole is back on the point. I'd like nothing better than to go up against the Directorate, but it wouldn't be a fair fight. You know they don't have a simulant program. We'd like the floor with them. Jenkins and Blake laughed again. Conspiracy theories were a constant source of chatter for Jenkins. She didn't just listen to me and my squad. She picked up scuttlebutt from all over. She could be relied upon to offer a piece of unreliable gossip. A tenacious rumor, never yet proven to be true, was that SimOps would be mobilized en masse against the Asiatic Directorate. Jenkins liked to recount this particular story whenever she got the chance. Our conversation was interrupted by a persistent tapping on my shoulder. I turned around to see someone hovering behind me. A short, middle-aged man, wearing a distinctive blue cap and a flak jacket with "Military Reporter" printed across the front. He was accompanied by a news drone, a small flying camera that flittered overhead, glaring down at us. Fuck off, Blake shouted, sighing by the camera like it was an annoying insect. Troopers, if I might have a few moments of your time, he blurted. He was sweating, waving a microphone device under my nose. I'm from the Point Times and newly assigned to the base. I'm compiling a piece on the Simulant Operations Program. Your Inscomp is veteran operators who can speak of the program. Didn't you hear me the first time? Blake said. The reporter was undeterred. He licked his lips and continued. Just your views on the operation so fast. How do you think it's going? Maybe something on the Maelstrom? Have you ever been inside? We're on downtime, I said. Go speak to someone who cares. He shook his head, dismissing my objections. What's it like seeing the crow face to face, as it were, on a regular basis? The man told you to go away, Jenkins said, half standing from her seat. Captain Harris, you have experienced 218 simulated deaths. You're the most prolific simulant operator ever inducted. Some are calling you a military hero. I've heard another trooper refer to you as Lazarus. Care to comment on that? The reporter paused, waiting for me to respond. When I didn't, he pressed on, as though reading from some invisible cue card. What are your personal views on the treaty? You had an unusual connection with it, which must be distressing at times. Can you share your views with us? Martinez appeared at the reporter's shoulder and stared down at him menacingly. Martinez was short, stocky, and powerfully built, an imposing figure, especially in drink. The news drone darted higher, touching what the reporter seemed oblivious to. I think it's time you left, Martinez growled. The captain doesn't like to talk about the treaty. He hauled the reporter by his shoulders and off his feet. The little man disappeared into the crowded bar. Looks like Martinez will get his fight after all, Jenkins said. Never fuck with a Venusan. Go easy on him, I called after them. I'd better see to this, Jenkins said, following Martinez. They left Blake and me alone. He was watching the dancer. She turned another lap of the bar, keen to show Blake that she was still interested. Captain, Blake said, eyeing the woman as she passed by. I need to talk to you. I smiled. But some other time, I guess. Yeah, if you don't mind. I nodded, and Blake was gone as well. I had promised Kaminsky that I would only have a drink down in the district, but a drink after an experience like the New Haven was not something to be taken lightly. After the first day of drinking, the rest was a blur. On the third day, I was awoken early. My room door chime sounded repeatedly. The fact that I was in my room and not the station brig was a good start. I had a vague recollection of the Point's MPs getting involved in something. Whatever had happened couldn't have been serious enough to warrant detention. I rolled out on my cot and shook myself awake, clutching at some fatigues and stumbling into them. I punched at the door control console. A squat utility robot sat outside, with tracks and clawed arms. The botched chest was taken up by a viewer screen that showed an animated face. I squinted in the bright corridor lights, and the robot paused before speaking. Captain Conrad Harris? Serial code 93778? I nodded, baring my wrist. The bot extended a scanner and swiped my serial code tattoo, confirming my ID. Is 7 days up already? I asked. You have been recertified for active duty. Your station leave is canceled with immediate effect. The robot jabbed one of its claws at me and slapped an envelope against my bare chest. I slowly took it, noting the Alliance military seal. The robot's viewer shifted to display a smirking face. New orders. General Cole wants you to report to his office at 0800 hours tomorrow. You have a new mission. Cole? I asked dumbly. That's what I said. The robot backed away from the door. His electronic face shifted into a frown. You look like shit, buddy. I'm only saying it to be kind. Clean up. You don't look good so good yourself, I muttered. The robot noisily rolled down the corridor. I slammed the door for a moment, turning over the envelope. A new mission is a good thing, I told myself. That ever-present urge to climb back into the simulator tank, to make transition to my simulant, rose up inside of me. But direct orders from General Cole? That was unusual. Cole was serious business. This had to be something big, something special. Maybe Jenkins was right. There was a first time for everything. The pain on my head told me that now was not the time to think about it. I fell back into my cot and allowed my pounding headache to subside a little. I turned, took in my room. It was a small officer's cube. Nothing flash, not a larger stateroom. As a captain, I would have been entitled to that, but I didn't want it. I wasn't one for material possessions, and my cubicle reflected that. Austere, somewhere to sleep and not much more. But I kept a random jumble of personal articles beside my cot, just enough to remind me that I was still a member of the human race. A preserved Krell claw, taken from a combat suit after a sim-op ended with a live return to the point. A blasted scrap of plastic, recovered from a destroyed plasma rifle. Some spent solid-shot shell cases. My father's old revolver, an ancient pistol passed down from my grandfather. A pink silver-set ring with orange gems. Her picture. The photo was faded with age. A picture from Azure. The backdrop of blue sky played to the red gloss of her lips. The deep almond of her eyes. Her long, dark hair, always thick with her scent. I touched the image and it sprang to life, mimicking the one that she had been. We had been happy, then. I closed my eyes. I had another mission. That was something, but it was a day away. I needed another drink.